Okay, well, we have a bit of a long meeting, so let's go ahead and get started. If we could go live, that would be great.
We are live.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. It is 5:03 p.m. We are going to call the Quality of Life Committee meeting to order. May I please get a roll call?
Counselor Castro,
Presente.
Counselor Chavez,
Here.
Counselor Garcia,
Present.
Counselor Faulkner.
Here.
Madam Chair,
Here.
you have a quorum, madam.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Moving on to approval of the agenda. We have two presentations and currently I do not see our first presenter here. Oh, is Director Nelson also supposed to be here with you? Okay, so I do not see Director Nelson yet. If I could get a motion to adjust the agenda so that we have the 5B going before 5A, that would be wonderful.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda with the amendment of 5B going first before 5A. May I please, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Marcella, can you remind us what was pulled today?
Yes, items L, M, P, Q, R, and item J was pulled, but Counselor Castro has pulled it back.
Wonderful. All right, anything else that anybody would like to pull at this time? And if not, can I get a motion to approve as amended?
To approve as amended. Second.
Motion and a second. May I please have a roll call?
Counselor Castro,
Yes.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner, Madam Chair,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you so much. All right, moving on to our first presentation now. We have the arts and culture funding for council districts. We have Chelsea Johnson, our arts and culture director, here to present. I asked Chelsea to come here to give us just a very quick presentation and reminder about the dollars that we have available, as we only have until the end of the fiscal year to spend them. But they tend to come to us every year, so things to think about for next fiscal year as well. Chelsea, over to you.
Right. Is that better? Is it working? Okay. Thank you, Counselor. It's nice to talk to you all again. I'll keep it really quick since I know you have a ton on your agenda tonight. Arts and culture funding for Santa Fe Council districts, and I will also send this PowerPoint to all of you afterwards, so you're able to review it on your own time as well. Okay, so reminder, we have $10,000 reserved every year for each city council district to dedicate to artistic and cultural programming. You can either team up with your fellow counselor to put on one big event, or you can divide it among the two of you and spend it how you wish. So what kinds of programming can you do? Events, art projects, creative placemaking initiatives, anything that touches on arts and culture in your district. So here are some examples of things that counselors have proposed or done or that could be a possibility. Creative placemaking, you could engage in murals, asphalt art initiatives to help create safer intersections and crossways, trail and pathway beautification, cultural storytelling. You could do a neighborhood story maps project. The previous city historian, Valerie Rangel, has done some really cool projects with that, most recently in the Baca neighborhood. You could do a program or series with the city historian or with the poet laureate, who are both wonderful to work with, or any kind of guided community conversation and connection. You can also do gatherings and events that center arts and or culture. There's an Art by Bike project that has happened a couple times in the cities. In the city, I know that District 3 has discussed a lowrider gathering, which should be super fun. So Zobra, readings, talks, performances, gatherings around food traditions and innovations, block parties, all those possibilities. And finally, I just want to shout out UNESCO-related events. As you hopefully have heard and will continue to hear many times, this is our 20th anniversary as the first UNESCO creative city in the United States, and as one of the very first creative cities of crafts and folk art in the world. So we're doing a lot of programming in arts and culture around these 6 overarching designations: pottery, fiber arts, woodcraft, performing arts, metalwork, and new traditional, which is where we're kind of grouping things like mural art, lowriders, other Santa Fe artistic traditions that maybe aren't centuries old, but are certainly going to persist for centuries into the future, we hope. So we especially encourage you to consider ways that these arts are alive and well in your neighborhood and how you might uplift and elevate those arts and artists. So a couple logistics. Arts and culture staff can help. We can't fully execute your event for you, but we are here to assist with ideas, and we will also, of course, process the funding. Just bear in mind that funding takes a while, so plan in advance as much as you can. Your event has to be complete by the end of the fiscal year, but it starts again July 1st. You'll have another chance, and it is never too soon to start planning for next year. And we have a simple jot form that you can submit your requests through, and I will send that. You've received that in email, but I'll resend it to you again because we know where email goes these days. All right, any questions?
Thank you so much. Any questions from the committee at this time? Counselor Castro?
Thank you so much, Director. If you could just maybe send an email to make sure that we remember if we
Yes.
gave that funding in which fiscal year and make sure if we know that those have, I know my particular funding had some issues, so I'd just like an update on that.
No problem.
Thank you so much.
Yep, thanks all.
Any other questions at this time?
I'll send my follow-up right now. Thank you all very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And if you could also send that presentation over to Marcella so that she can make sure that it gets posted on Civic Clerk for the public, that would be wonderful.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to very slowly, Director Nelson is parking, so she is on site. So our next presentation, it's going to be a retail leakage study. We have Johanna Nelson, the Economic Development Director, and also Barry Matherly, wonderful, from Hickey Global, who is our contractor who did the study, is here to present. If you're able to start without Director Nelson, we can do that, or maybe you can just give us an introduction to you and your organization while we are waiting for Ms. Nelson. Also, it does sometimes take a while to get the presentation up anyhow, so we can get started on that process.
It's good to be here today. Very much.
Thank you. And then your mic, you're going to need to make sure that you're really speaking into it so that our Zoom picks it up. You almost have to kind of eat it, it feels like. So, and just make sure the green light is on. You can also pop it up onto the.
Oh, there you go. Is
There
it
you go.
okay?
Yes, if it's uncomfortable, you can pop it up onto the little platform. A lot of people who are taller will do that to assist.
There we go. Does that work?
That works perfectly. Thank you.
So I am Barry Matherly. I'm with Hickey Global. We do our economic development consulting firm, and we work exclusively with cities and counties and economic development groups across the country and actually in other countries too. But the one thing I will mention that I'm proud of is before this, I spent 28 years doing just what Joanna does, is I did a city economic development, I did county economic development, I did city county economic, and did regional and university. So spent 28 years doing that. So it's exciting to be back and in front of the council. And I have my guest speaker here today. So I was just doing a little introduction, please. Yeah.
Director Nelson, as you are ready, no worries.
Madam Chair, counselors, great to see you. I apologize about being late. We had a CDC meeting and went over. They're still going. So great to be here with you. We're really excited to put this in front of you. As I'm not sure what I quite missed from Barry's intro, but for our office, part of what we are looking forward to accomplish this year is figuring out a strategy to support our local businesses, which we know are very much focused on retail. And so we enlisted the help of Hickey Global to perform that assessment of the spending habits of our current local economy, to understand, do we have gaps in our retail consumption right now? It was not revelatory in a way. We know that we have a robust retail sector. It makes up about over a fourth of our local economy. But what has been really helpful is this is a starting point to understand where there are opportunities to really strengthen and support our local businesses and work on strategies and deploy those, which we'll talk about later today in the upcoming year. So I'd love to turn it over to Barry to get more into the strategies that were identified, and we are working with them to deploy as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So on the next slide, just to kind of give you an idea, we're just giving a taste tonight to give you an idea of, but I want to include what the full paper looks like. We're wrapping it up right now. But these are the sections you will see in the full paper and then analysis with all of those. On the next slide, you'll kind of see right to the point what we're looking at. And this is kind of the big. And as she said, good news, congratulations, you're doing an excellent job. I mean, so a lot of times we do this, it is quite opposite. Communities have a lot of retail leakage. Here, only in a few minor categories do we see it. So overall, you have a very
I'm sorry, Mr. Matherly, I'm just going to have you pause for one moment. Whoever is running this, yep, exactly. If we could move all the little cameras and closed captioning out of the way of the slides as much as possible, that would be wonderful. Okay, go on.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the two big things here, once again, you run a surplus on almost all the categories, which is excellent. Not only at the city, but the county level, just to kind of look at that too while we're at it. And so that's great. The other good thing is you're looking this why you are in a position of strength. And that is unfortunately, most people wait till it's not a positive situation to try to dig that up. And it's hard to pull out once you start losing that retail, kind of losing that advantage. So doing it as a position of strength is the perfect time to kind of drive that forward. The other thing is, even though we see overall citywide a strength in the retail, we know that there are pockets throughout the city that don't see the same. So there are different needs in different neighborhoods. There are different recreational opportunities that are kind of newer that don't fit into some of these categories. And so we know that as the city as a whole looks very strong, there are pockets of the city and other areas that do need additional retail and do need additional offerings and different type of offerings. So you'll see here, there's a couple listed here. Entertainment options, we'll talk about a little later, but retail and entertainment have kind of become intertwined a lot. And so it's not your traditional retail anymore. So as we move on, you will see obviously the city area, just as example for people who want to know, and the next slide does the county. So we could look at both of those geographies. Interesting enough, there wasn't a whole lot of difference between the city and the county on retail leakage. On the next slide, we'll kind of get to the point here is, so we did all the data crunching, all the numbers. We know we have a good situation, but what can be done moving forward? So kind of a forward leaning. Some of this is already ongoing with the city and the staff. Some of it could be additional. So on the first one, we'll see that there's kind of 8 core recommendations. I'm not going to go over all of them, but just give you a taste of them really quick. So these are the first 4. The second 4 are kind of on the back side here, ones that we want to kind of hit a little stronger as we go through them. So for each of these, and you'll see on the next page that we developed kind of a 1-pager for you so you could understand the why, the rationale, kind of what the impact we think would come out of this, kind of a time horizon, and then kind of step by step you might move through this. So obviously supporting local retailers, you already do that. There's some great campaigns. The interesting thing here we see is, and there's kind of a buy local and all this. Why do that? You've got such a great environment right now. A lot of it is because of the internet. So more and more people are buying online, and that is cutting into family businesses and small businesses and opportunities for others to develop, especially in neighborhoods that are not in kind of core areas or core retail corridors. So this is a good time, once again, from a position of strength, to kind of start leaning into that a little bit. The next one here, we see kind of National Main Street. It's just something to mention. We think this would be specific just to the downtown core or other places in the city that could have an emerging downtown core. But it's a great program. Put it out here for you. I've actually in the past, long ago, run a Main Street program. It's a great experience. They're great. Moving on, we've got looking at a tourism driven. I won't spend this because you probably need to be a model for most other cities on how this works. But this is more an ongoing encouragement and some other things you might want. On the fourth one here, I think this would be an interesting one. And this is kind of tying back to an earlier conversation. So ICSC, has anyone heard of that? International Council of Shopping Centers. So they throw the biggest retail trade fair in the world in Vegas every year, coming up in May. And so many cities and counties go there to encourage or inform retailers they want in their area to come. And this not includes your traditional, but we've got one city that goes there just to recruit grocery stores because they were kind of a grocery store food desert. And so they wanted all their neighborhoods to have grocery stores, and they've done a fantastic job at that. It's gotten more into the play piece and that entertainment. And so now they won't allow you to say International Council of Shopping Centers. They only go by ICSC. And that's because they have now trampoline parks and these kind of like putt-putt things where it's like a putt-putt and a kids play zone and a restaurant all hooked. So they're combining up a lot of things to make kind of the retail more engaging and more multi-purpose. And so that's why they even kind of ignored their long historical name, because they got a lot of that there in people. So that would be a great close by practically and something you could. Moving along, we've got just a few more here. The entertainment options, once again, you do a great job here, but this just kind of brings to life some of the art, performing space. And then on the last couple, we're going to kind of focus on here. This is one where we were talking about overall, the data that we can get, the data that drives these studies is only at a certain level. And at this point, we're drilling all the way down to the city level. Get into the neighborhoods, that's primary data where you have to kind of collect that. Cities are in a great position to do that. The recommendation here is to kind of move forward with maybe kind of, you can decide what neighborhoods or how you want to kind of break it up, but a survey where you go out and ask the residents specifically what they want or what their needs are in this community. And then that data, that's primary data, is very valuable if you tie that in to conversations with retailers you might want or entrepreneurs that want to start a business and kind of need some kind of data. Is this a need in the community? Or if you go to ICSC, it'll be very valuable there and improve this position. So that is, those surveys are great. You know, you could put them on your website. Obviously, you could put them in utility bills. There's a lot of ways to get out an online link to that. Or you can do some, the economic development staff has in some neighborhoods hours, and so they could help promote that there. A lot can be done there. On the next, we're down to the last two. I'm trying to go very quickly here. This is another project we're working on, which is a business retention and expansion. This goes beyond retail. This is all businesses in the community and a proactive outreach on how to work with them, how to survey them, how to talk to them, how this ties into the other projects you have on, and how really to support your whole existing community here. I think that's very. Then lastly, and this is kind of a makerspace. We know you have a great kind of industrial makerspace where they have the cutting and all that machinery. I love those spaces. You've got kind of the food incubator space, more on the private side. This is more of a creative art space that's kind of less industrial and more just creative, what can for performing arts or retail, can people who are not doing kind of the heavy craft piece of kind of arts and that thing. And it also include culinary arts and restaurants. So maybe these people on these other groups could also partner on a joint facility. Typically, these have to be of scale to be their own destinations. So these are not where people are just doing it, but where you want to attract people in, see it, experience it. So with that, I just want to kind of close out and turn it back over if you've got anything else to say. But I think the key points are here is you're doing a great job. However, the retail landscape is changing. And so to just think it's going to stay the same and think you'll stay on top, it's probably not the best strategy. Actually being proactive and kind of instituting some of these might be a way to kind of drive this forward and kind of keep that quality of life people have expected here. Thank you for giving me the time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And, I think a lot of the credit for how well we're doing. We do have a really wonderful team in economic development and over in tourism. So thank you for recognizing all the work that they've been doing and continue to do. And again, Director Nelson having the foresight to really look at what else we need to be doing moving forward. I thank you a lot for that. Director Nelson, did you have anything to add before we jump to questions? Okay, questions, comments from the committee? Counselor Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not necessarily a question, just a request if we could place this presentation as part of the packet, just because there's a lot of great information and I want to make sure the public has access.
Yes, Ms. Apodaca sent us an email earlier already stating that she recognized that we did not get it in on time, and she will be putting it in as soon as she has access to edit Civic Clerk again. So she is on top of that, as she always is. Counselor Faulkner?
I will say it's difficult for me because I can't see the presentation there. So this has happened like at least 5 times. So the presentations really need to be on the site that we're using. So
Okay, and let's talk with the clerk offline about that, because I think they maybe have access to make some edits after the fact. Okay, so let's talk to Andrea. Thank you. That's important. Counselor Castro?
No, I just wanted to thank Economic Development. I don't always get the nicest emails, but when I do for my constituents, it has to do with economic development. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I just had a couple of questions following up on some of these strategies. Director Nelson, as you and I have been discussing in EDAC, looking at both the strategic action plan that is coming from the Office of Economic Development in general, as well as looking at how do we really focus the work of the Economic Development Advisory Committee. I feel like there's a lot of meat here. So want to make sure that we do share that with the committee as we're having these conversations. If we could get this information emailed out, I think that'd be helpful. But a couple of things that kind of just sparked in my brain. There was a conversation around, a lot of shopping happens online right now. I maybe am misremembering, but I believe during COVID, there was an initiative to try to create an online marketplace where local businesses, that we essentially were helping them create an online platform so that they could take advantage of the increase in online shopping. Obviously, during COVID, this was extremely necessary, but I know that has been a trend that I believe has, potentially even grown after COVID. Is that something that still exists, that we have explored, that we could explore? Can you speak anything to that?
Madam Chair, counselors, thank you for that question. You're referring, I believe, to the platform that tourism was leading, and that's through a firm called Blue Dot. And to your question, it is currently active. In fact, we do try to promote that to businesses in our outreach, that they can sign up and sell their Santa Fe products through that website. I think it's a really great point that as we move forward with whether that ends up being a campaign or messaging of how we're trying to promote and encourage our residents to shop local first, that an online component, whether that's building off of the current City of Santa Fe's website. And I want to clarify, it's not the City of Santa Fe. I think I'll get you the exact address, but you can link to that through tourism. Whether it's building off of that one, we would wholeheartedly explore that, if that makes the most sense, or doing something apart from it.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. I do appreciate that. And I think you're right that it is 2 pieces of that campaign. One is letting businesses know that it's an option, but I'm not sure that the public knows to go to it. So it maybe is not as worth the time investment, or is there a financial investment for businesses, or do we offer it free of charge?
Madam Chair and counselors, it is free of charge.
Okay, wonderful. But I'm sure it does take time for them to manage it. So that would be great. And I'm glad that we already have that started. The other thing I was interested in is regarding entertainment. Director Nelson, I know you and I have had a lot of conversation on family friendly, and how do we help recruit businesses that are really geared towards families, towards kids, towards youth. We get a lot of the comments from, families of, well, Albuquerque has a ton of trampoline parks. Where's yours? And the city of Albuquerque isn't doing them. It really is about business recruitment with that focus. are you able to speak? I know this is something that we are continuing to work on, and so we will have more information soon, but do you have anything to add to that conversation at this time of how we can, or what the plan is to continue to move forward with building that entertainment sector in our city?
Madam Chair, Councilors, thank you again for this really important question. We are aware that when we look at those retail numbers, we see surpluses that encompass our MSA. And to Barry's earlier point, currently the NAICS code and how we gather that information is challenging to really drill down into the specifics. By moving forward and really getting primary data and getting those surveys directly to our family members, we're going to have a lot more stats and numbers that show that there is a demand for things like trampoline parks that I get, my email gets inundated with as well. We are currently working with Santa FAM, an organization here that is helping us to prepare an assessment of our quote unquote family-friendly businesses. And I know I'm kind of skewing into family-friendly specifically, but we do know that outside of our major entertainment NAICS codes like the opera and our performing arts, a considerable amount of money spent in entertainment is generated from families. So that's where you have a blurred line. But we are working with them, and that will be the start of these ongoing conversations, and as well going into getting that firsthand information and data about our families and how they are spending money. I will say one more thing to add, that when we talk to some of the business owners in Albuquerque, for example, that have things like a trampoline park or a putt-putt golf, or these places that families are going to from Santa Fe, they express a lack of desire necessarily coming to Santa Fe because residents are already going to Albuquerque and there's not a need, they have to prove financially that it makes sense. The great thing about Barry's report is it sets a standard that we're able to show that here are residents, these are how we are spending money currently, but we actually have that surplus in spending because of our tourism dollars, and it's actually greater than our MSA. So the potential of revenue that can be generated here is actually greater than just our population numbers.
Yeah, that is definitely interesting data, and I think maybe that does kind of speak to who we are recruiting. That if Albuquerque businesses are like, well, why would we have to? Maybe getting in somebody new to the region, and bringing in that tourism information. I know when we travel, my son is always asking to go to Putt Putt since we don't have it here, and so I've been to Putt Putt in Tucson, in Denver, like all over the place, just because Oliver really wants to see it. So. I look forward to how we can really use that data. And then I was thinking the same thing. This is more of a comment, the neighborhood surveys. I know that we've had conversations, especially on the south side, about we've had this conversation with grocery stores saying there's not enough rooftops. Of course, the south side is growing very, very quickly. So even in the few years since those conversations have occurred, I would be very interested to really dive deep into the south side of all that development happening that is taking on a bit more of a suburban feel. That I think that we have a real opportunity there, and businesses have a real opportunity there to make some waves and to really create the vibrant community that we'd like to see. Not just in this part of the city, but really getting out to districts. Well, 4 is interesting because we have a ton of commercial space, but it's like kind of business commercial. But really getting out into districts 3 and 4. And then the other comment is just request to share this information with the Midtown team, as that is, of course, such an incredible opportunity of this 64 acres that we are really starting from not quite scratch, but there was a lot of feedback in the community development plan about desire for entertainment in that area, places that people could walk to. And so I think that this information as well will be relevant as we continue to move forward, and seeing how those neighborhood surveys, as we've talked about, one of the challenges of Midtown is it is going to be long-term development. It's going to take a while. We're not going to have it all set up, in the next year. And so watching as those neighborhoods shift, and really staying on top of the needs of the neighborhood, surrounding Midtown. If we are looking at some of the business development in 5 years, what has happened to those neighborhoods? Because they are shifting rapidly already. So if we could share that with the Midtown team, that would be wonderful.
Madam Chair, noted. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Really, really, truly appreciate you both being here, and thank you for the presentation, and looking forward to continuing the conversations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, counselors.
Thank you. Okay, let's jump into consent. And I will say that, in the famous words of Taylor Swift, it's me, I'm the problem. It's the reason that we've pulled so much. So I apologize. I will be as speedy as possible. First, starting off with item L. So this is request for approval of a budget amendment resolution, BAR, to allocate $1,646,000 from general fund balances to support staff capacity, small business, crime mitigation and security grants, small business development, workforce development, and office rent for community services and economic development. So Director Nelson, welcome back to the microphone. Director Nelson, our Economic Development Director and Interim Housing Director as well, for questions. And my interest here really, looking at some of these projects, but I think one that really has risen to the top of conversation, at least in District 4, is small business crime mitigation and security grants. And so I would really love to hear more about what do these programs look like? Where did this idea come from? What are the things that we have seen that have been successful in this arena, and how this is going to be rolled out into the community?
Madam Chair, counselors, thank you for the question. For clarification, do you want me to focus on specifically the crime mitigation program or all?
Let's start there. And then we
Crime
can,
mitigation.
yeah, that'd be
Okay.
great.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And I would like to acknowledge that this is a joint effort between us and Community Services. So Director Hammond Paul is here as well as Director Sanchez. The crime mitigation program was an idea that came to us based on inquiries that we receive on a regular basis from businesses. I would say on Cerrillos Road, downtown, Southside Airport Road, requesting assistance and frustration about their business being vandalized, broken into, the gamut. And we started exploring what other cities have done to address the situation outside of, obviously, we're not the police, we're not safety. We are very much in place to support businesses so they have the tools that they need to grow and thrive. We actually didn't have to look too far. The city of Albuquerque has a program called the Broken Windows Program. And it's a fund that they started for $250,000 to focus on windows specifically that were broken due to vandalism for their businesses. So we've been in contact with their team and exploring how that program has rolled out. This idea that is presented in front of you is a way that we feel like is a response to be able to support our businesses that are dealing with effects from the things that I mentioned, like vandalism and theft. So our hypothesis is very much around, we haven't committed exactly to the eligible uses. We have a draft in place. But if you think about the gamut of the issues that our businesses confront, all the way from security and protection, and I'm thinking of a bike business that's right around the corner that experienced a theft, that perhaps having barred windows or a camera system would have prevented a really significant burglary that they experienced. So anywhere from prevention all the way to dealing with the aftermath, like I'm thinking of defecation on the front, cleaning up, et cetera, that some of our businesses are dealing with too. So really the gamut, and working with city staff, working with you all to really hone in on what those eligible uses could be and what would be most helpful and useful to our business owners.
Wonderful. And I imagine that you are, if this does get approved, will there be some community outreach with business owners as you work on those eligible uses? How, and when creating those lists?
Madam Chair and councilors, correct. We would engage community and our business owners to see what would be most impactful, as well as communicating with staff and you all.
Okay, wonderful. And has Albuquerque, do they have results of what has occurred after that they've put this plan into place?
Madam Chair, councilors, thanks for the question. It was an incredibly successful program in Albuquerque, and they actually expended all of the grant funding, I believe, within 6 months. So there was an incredible amount of demand for this. One other element of this program, if I may, that I think is unique and worth speaking to is that in addition to supporting local businesses, both in repairs, but also proactively, allowing them to put in place camera systems, things like that. There's also the legal mechanism to make this work is that the city has the opportunity to request information or basically engage people in things like trainings. So we can do, a variety of types of programming as part of the condition of these supports to further enhance community-based public safety or programs that the city finds effective in terms of local deterrence and things like that. So it's a give, but also we have the opportunity to engage communities to help them make themselves stronger.
And to your point, and one of my questions, thank you for leading into it, has to do with anti-donation. So is that how we get around anti-donation? Is essentially absolutely we're going to be putting this forward, but as you know, in response, we are also going to be asking businesses to be taking part in these larger community safety programs, efforts, initiatives.
Madam Chair, that's correct.
Okay, wonderful. And then has Albuquerque seen a reduction in crime in these areas, or is it too new to tell?
Too new to tell. I want to make sure I get the date right. I think it launched about 6 months ago in Albuquerque.
Okay. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you guys looking at this. I know it's something that I hear a lot from a lot of businesses. I think it will be interesting to have conversations about businesses in the historic district. I'd be curious and maybe check with land use about that. You mentioned bars on windows on a business around. So I don't know if there's historic district implications. I know Director Lamboy was around. But just something to be wary of to make sure that we are on top of that and ahead of that so we don't run into that snag at that time. We do have a very busy agenda, so I won't jump into too much else here. I think that you've done a pretty good job of laying these out, and of course, as things progress, I will love to have you come back for a update on how these have impacted economic development. But before we move on, any questions or comments from the committee? Councilor Faulkner.
So one of the questions I found in my district, if we can get the businesses to band together, we've created a couple of associations with a Latin population and then also along the airport road corridor. Could some of this money be used to help do like the equivalent of a neighborhood watch, but only for businesses? Because the neighborhood watches are effective. And I think if we have businesses that are well organized and they form an association, they can kind of use the same mechanism. So could some of this money be used to help organize the businesses so that they create like a business neighborhood watch?
Madam Chair, councilors, thank you for that comment. I think that's a fantastic idea that we'd love to explore.
So maybe we can talk offline about it.
Madam Chair and councilor would love to.
Great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Couple questions. One is over, this request has got 5 different requests within one. Is any reason why it's not 5 separate requests?
Madam Chair, counselors, those were the instructions from the finance department to write our bar as such.
Okay. Just because all of the other requests are broken out and I'd hate for, and in an instance, and I'm not saying I don't support any of what's proposed here, but it's you either got to vote for them all or vote against them, and that's not fair for us. So I think the guidance given in the past was for us to have them broken out one by one request. So second question is in regards to staff capacity. Seems like we're finding a loophole to bring on staff through contracts when guidance in the past was we don't hire staff with one-time funding. Now we're doing it through contracts. And so my question is, how long are these contracts for these employees?
Madam Chair, counselors, thank you for the really great question. And I apologize, I don't have it in front of me, but to your point, we are requesting to extend the contract administrator position that is originally funded through ARPA. My hope is that position will become permanent, and we will work with HR to acknowledge that we do have an extreme need for contract assistance. We're one of the only offices in the city that are managing a lot of different contracts as well as grants. And so this would help our office not only manage our administrative duties due to the grants and contracts, but also be able to seek additional funding as well, have more capacity. The other one is a Southside Business Coordinator. And if you recall, this is actually, I think, was a great idea from the governing body to explore this approach that we're taking to have more, what I would say, boots on the ground, but more coordinators actually in our geographic locations. So as a reminder, we requested funding specifically for the downtown area, but also supporting a Main Street. Hopefully that position also becomes permanent. And then the additional request for a South Side coordinator, I would say very much both of those are in pilot phase to explore, does it warrant requesting permanent funding? Is that an effective approach for serving our businesses? And then the other request for additional staff is to support a financial empowerment center coordinator. And this was a grant that we received. And in order to participate and receive additional funding, they need to see that we have a staff person identified and being able to coordinate with our contractors there. And so again, the hope is that this is a start that we would be able to request permanent funding.
Okay, and how long are these contracts for?
It is a variable amount due to the actual salary, but roughly in approximately 12 months.
And did you say you're in conversations to make these positions permanent in fiscal year 26 budget? Or what's the plan?
Madam Chair, Counselor, thank you for the question. We are in conversations currently with HR to understand the mechanism of how to do that and how to gain support. The hope is that we can prove that there is a need and the position has been successful. So then we can request for the next budget cycle to have that as a permanent position and be created.
Okay. One of the positions you mentioned is a contract and grant administrator between OED and Office of Affordable Housing. Doesn't Affordable Housing have their own administrator?
Madam Chair and counselors, you are correct. They actually have 2 contractors that are at full capacity, 100% working on CDBG and Affordable Housing Trust Fund, with limited ability to really support other contracts outside of those grant programs.
So since we got Mr. Scott here, Mr. Scott, that's something I think we really need to look into and not really rely on contractors. If the work is there, we need to have full-time staff people. That way there's a sustainable workforce to manage the work that's there. Because in these instances where one-time funding is not available to continue these contracts, it could really put the city in a bad predicament, which I do not want. So as we're going into fiscal year development for 26, Mr. Scott, I'm going to lobby for our economic development director here that we figure out how we can get some of these positions into full-time staff and less reliant on contractor work. Yep. No other questions? Thank you, Joanna. I
Thank you.
really appreciate all the work.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Chavez.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, can these funds help support businesses that have already taken initiative in putting those security measures in place? I think a lot of small businesses have invested because, they couldn't wait on the city to support them. So they've invested money, and I imagine that has been a huge strain on their business. So I would want us to be, there to be some equity and not leaving those individuals out. Has that been discussed at all?
Madam Chair, Counselors, great question. And looks like Director Hammond Paul wants to take.
Madam Chair, councilors, we have some ability to structure this as we'd like. The precedents set by Albuquerque in this program, I believe they have it's kind of like a grandfather clause where it's an incident in the past calendar year or something to that effect. So we have some nimbleness about how we would choose to do that. Obviously, there's a lot of the way the program is structured is it needs to be verified that a purchase actually happened, or that, for instance, in Albuquerque, you need to have a police report that a vandalism actually occurred. So similarly, we would work through a process to make sure that we're actually reimbursing people for things that were purchased within a time frame that we set.
Right, so it wouldn't leave anybody out, really, whether they have security measures already in place or not.
Assuming we can come to a timeline that makes sense, so someone who 5 years ago bought a camera system, I'm not sure would necessarily fit the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish, whereas 6 months ago, so those would be details we would work out as we develop the program out.
And I would hope we would also look at reported incidents to the city from small businesses, because it may have been, since 2020 that they reported many incidents to us. They didn't necessarily get the support they needed, so had to invest on their own. So I just want to make sure that we're not leaving anyone out, especially those that took initiative to protect their businesses. If anything, I feel like we should be supporting them the most since they took that first step. So I just want to make sure that the way that this is put out doesn't leave, any of our small businesses out, whether they've taken initiative on their own or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Castro.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I will try to be brief because my co-counselors have made some amazing points. So thank you, Director. I just would like maybe a report on how we do work with PD and park rangers, since we are going to need to generate some of these complaints. I'm super excited that community health and safety is part of that conversation, and that we are taking into account sanitation stations. I think that sanitation stations and sharps are things that people in the neighborhood are really concerned about, in particular around parks. So including not only the park rangers, but also Melissa McDonald in the conversation would be great. Sorry, Director McDonald. And I think that is all. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, one more thing. Constituent services, since they are dealing with a lot of the graffiti and whatnot.
Thank you. Good add too. Any other questions or comments? And if not, is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second. May I please have a roll call?
Counselor Castro?
Yes.
Counselor Chavez?
Yes.
Counselor Garcia?
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner?
Yes.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you so much. All right, moving on to item M. This is request for approval of a budget amendment resolution bar to allocate $837,000 from general fund balances for the purchase of automated traffic enforcement equipment and evidence equipment. And we have Ben Valdez, our Deputy Chief of Police, here to present. Great to see you, DC Valdez. How are you? Make sure it's on.
It's on one time and I turned off the Zoom, so.
Well, I had pulled this item. I did want to talk a little bit more about the automated traffic enforcement equipment, both get some information about where we are now, but also I wanted to bring up some roadblocks that occurred when we had previously had this discussion to ensure that those issues, I would hate to see them repeated, as I felt that they were some that could have been avoided. So first and foremost, I would like some more information about, what are we looking at? What does this process look like? When do we see approvals? There's been a lot of conversation generated around this in terms of who should be doing enforcement. If that is within the police department, do we really want to be utilizing uniformed officers for this purpose? As well as some of the conversation around the advancement of the technology and whether it can actually produce with enough discretion the type of citations that we would like to see. So let's start there.
Madam Chair, so first to start off, I think from I think it was 19, was the last time that we brought this type of proposal before the.
Sorry, DC Valdez, can you get closer to that mic?
Sorry about that. I think it's been since 2019 was the last time pre-COVID is when we brought the proposal to forward for automated traffic enforcement.
No, because I wasn't here yet, and I was definitely here for the last one. I think it was 2020 or 2021.
I know it's early on before we have what we have today. So I think right now there's much more of an appetite for these types of tools to be utilized in our community, where before there's some concerns. And the great thing about technology, it's advanced since then. So for us, what we're started from is a clean slate. So we're going to start with the request for proposals first. We're going to take a look at some of the proposals from folks that have technology. One thing of interest that we're looking for is something that does both speed and sound enforcement, because both have been concerns that the police department has heard ever since we've been in COVID and then coming out of COVID. But we're at ground zero right now. Our position is what we would like to do. We don't feel that we should pull an officer that could be out there issuing citations or respond to higher priority calls, reviewing these violations, because they're going to be civil violations, not a criminal violation. So we'd much rather have someone who is a non-police officer with training doing this job. But as of right now, we're going to be helping out with setting that groundwork to make sure that the foundation is there. We want to get the program going, but eventually we would love to get it established either in code enforcement or with another department that is suitable for that. Because again, there's civil penalties and they may have other frameworks that operate or are in place for that. Concerning the big thing right now, which is evolved since, again, the last time this came before, was privacy and data. How do we keep it? Where is it at? Are there agreements in place? And that is something we're going to be conscious of. So once we get the vendors, that is something we want to know is we want to avoid the selling of this data to third parties. We want to make sure that it fulfills the need that we have. And then once we're done with the process and it's been settled, then at that point, we only maintain the records that we need to for the purpose of running the program, not trying to keep it to see like, hey, here's the information, and then it winds up in the wrong hands of third parties. So privacy is going to be there, but we are going to need to retain some data during the hearing process until that is resolved. And then once that resolution is done, we can see what the retention is at that point. But right now we're at ground zero, fresh start, so we can see what we want to do with those RFPs. We're ready to get that stuff going, but first we need to have funding in place to say, what do we have to work with to start getting this going?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the privacy and data was a really big issue, and not feeling comfortable with the third party owning our data and being able to take it and use it. I mean, do we even know if that's a possibility that any of these companies would give up ownership of the data, that it could solely fall into our hands and follow our own, data management processes that have been set in place, as well as, disposal of said data when, the appropriate time has passed?
Madam Chair, so because the equipment usually for these types of enforcement equipment, there's usually technology leases that are out there. The data's have to go through the process, and that company that we select through the RFP is going to have to work with us to send out the notices and complete that whole process. But the good thing with the RFP is we can write in that RFP what our expectations are. We want to make sure that our data is not sold to third party companies for other means, that it's solely for what we have there. And that's going to be where we start with the negotiation. Now, there may be a higher cost if they're not able to utilize that for other means, if that's what it is. But that's what it comes down to. I think for us, our concerns for our city have been, we don't want that information out there. So that's where we're going to be at a starting point. Again, it may cost us a bit more, but we have to see what that is once we get through the process. But I think if at the heart of it, if we know from our standpoint that is something that is a no-go for us, then we're going to have that written into the RFP that we want to make sure there's security on that data, and no distribution or sale to a third party.
Given what is happening at the federal level, do we know if that is going to be a bigger challenge than it was before?
And what is that at the federal level? I'm not too clear on it.
Just in terms of some of the data sharing issues that we have run into, I know that one of the concerns was that, this information in the past had actually been given to ICE and had been utilized for raids. So that was one of the protection issues that had come up with the last conversation. Sounds like Councilor Faulkner, you might have some more information here.
State level, Senator Worth and House Representative Chris Chandler are working on a piece of legislation related to what these cameras can capture and how long the data can be held, and a lot around the privacy stuff that you're concerned about. I have the bill number at home on my whiteboard. I will text you tomorrow, but they are working. There's a state law moving through the session about exactly what you're concerned.
Thank you. And actually, that was another one of my questions, because from my understanding around some of the viewpoints of for example, I think Albuquerque PD, maybe Cruces PD, that they have stated that they feel that if this bill does pass at the state, that this will almost make these programs useless. And it's not the precise word that they use. They use something much more eloquent than that. Do either of you have any information on that?
So my understanding is that this law is putting parameters around what the speed cameras and the noise cameras can capture. So they're saying you can't capture the person's face, but you can capture the license plate. And then you can only hold the data on that for X amount of time. So they're really putting guardrails up to make sure that we're not setting ourselves up to have our citizens be part of a big data collection that the federal government's going to do that then can be used against our constituents.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, that's our understanding as well. We're following that bill to see, but again, if they're too restrictive, then at that point, we will come back with a follow-up saying, hey, this is not something worth launching in our community at this point if it's too restrictive.
Okay, thank you. The other things that had come up in our last conversation around this had to do with the way that these programs are paid for, which is that the company takes a percentage of the citation. However, our laws allow individuals to partake in community service instead of paying that citation. And in our previous conversations, I was not able to get an answer about one, how often would we expect this to occur? And I know that there was challenges because we would expect the volume of citations to go up inevitably, but that we didn't really have a good answer for where those dollars would come from to pay the company if our residents opted for community service instead. Is that something that has been figured out? And if not, I don't want to see anything until it is.
Actually, Madam Chair, that was something that was shared from my recollection last time we had this discussion. So again, if we elect for folks to do community service, then we would utilize the city's living wage to determine what the hours that they were doing for that community service, and the cost of what that violation would have costed would have come from the revenue generated from the program itself. So the city isn't essentially covering the costs in lieu of the person having to pay in exchange for their labor in the means of community service. So that was brought up during the last discussion because in the ordinance, my understanding is that was one thing that we had changed last time to include a provision to allow for community service instead of paying for the civil violation.
Right. And I understood that piece, but understanding where the city's money was going to come from, where's the budget going to come from if we have to pay the organization for these because
it's going to be out of the revenue that's generated from the program. So any revenue that's utilized to
I see.
the program,
Okay.
that would be utilized to offset those other costs as an operating cost.
Do we think that it'll actually balance out?
We'll have to wait and see. So at this point, that is something that we have to see. Again, if we have a huge number of violations and half of the folks are paying for those violations, it should be able to be sustainable.
Okay.
Now, if we have a small number of violations and everyone sees this as a great deterrent and they're driving 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, doing the speed limit, As I shared last time, and I'll share it again, I would love for the driving behavior of our city to put this program out of business, because that means our streets are much safer and there is no need for that type of equipment. Unfortunately, that's not the world we live in right now, but that is where I would like to see us go.
Okay. Me too. So to that point, we had discussed last time that this is not like a gotcha thing, that there are signs that warn people, hey, FYI, speed camera coming up, noise camera coming up. So we would still have that warning coming up for individuals. So it reminds those that are not wanting to purposely do those things to maybe slow themselves down or silence themselves.
Yes, Madam Chair, and it'd be the same thing like we do for officers that are out there running a traffic enforcement operation. They're in a vehicle. Sometimes they even have their cruise lights on. They're in the median, and fortunately, some folks are either distracted while they're driving, don't care about the speed limit, and they'll be given due notice that, hey, we're doing these operations. In addition, I know we're talking with a company, and that's something we can include in our program, is letting people know where they're going to be. Hey, we're going to have these devices in these locations. I don't know if you follow us on social media. We often post where we are for school zones, and we never leave empty-handed, unfortunately. So we're always going to find people that may be not paying attention or do not want to go the speed limit. And again, we'll address them as need be, but plenty of notice to folks so we can hopefully change the driving behavior. And that's what we're trying to get to at the heart of this, is changing that driving behavior so they're driving safe and making our streets safe.
Right. Yep. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that as well, that there would be notice. The last, oh my gosh, it just left my mind. There was one other big sticking point with it. Do you remember what it was last time?
The big concern that existed was surrounding the privacy and data concerns.
Just privacy and data. The calibration of the cameras, which is that they were calibrated by the company that does have a financial interest in citations being given out, and that there was no ability for us to essentially, have checks and balances on the calibration of the equipment. So I think that we were talking last time that at, 10, 11 miles an hour over is when a ticket would be given, a citation would be given. And we didn't really have a way to say, yes, this camera is definitely calibrated so that we're hitting people at 11 and not at 10. I know there was kind of some conversation that, but there's a video review, but seeing the difference between 10 or 11 or 9 and 11. I don't know if that is something that has been resolved or if that is going to have to be a conversation that occurs during these RFPs. And if so, I just want to make sure those conversations occur as well.
It absolutely will. But again, my viewpoint, especially if they're in a school zone, if you're a mile over, you're speeding. So that threshold is there, again, to get people to be in compliance. But where some of these devices potentially may be placed, again, our big concern is neighborhoods, school zones, those areas. We're not looking for this to be a revenue generating. We're looking to change behavior. But for calibration, that is something we are going to look into, because we want to be able to validate that. Because if we're not able to calibrate it and demonstrate there's a violation, then we're not going to prevail if there is a hearing. So it's in our best interest to make sure that, for one, we're being fair, but then two, we have properly calibrated equipment. And that's the same process that we utilize for our traffic enforcement by our police officers.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Glad to hear that's something. And, I agree, but how do we discuss, like, when the if we want to put a citation at 26 as opposed to 25, but I just think that making sure that when we determine what that level is going to be, that, to your point, that we make sure that they're calibrated and appropriately dispensing citations and not doing so when they should not be occurring.
Absolutely. We don't want folks to get a notice in the mail if they were going the speed limit. Then it causes, again, questions and confidence. Confidence can be lost in the equipment, and we don't want to do that.
Great. Wonderful. I don't have any further questions at this time. I'll go ahead and send it over to the committee. Counselor Faulkner.
So I've been talking to Chief Joy about a piece of legislation that I believe Counselor Michael Garcia and I are sponsoring around speed cameras. And there seems to be some kind of conflict between the existing ordinance and what you can put in the RFP. Like, we have to change the existing ordinance in order for the RFP to.
Madam Chair, Councilor
be vetted.
Faulkner, one thing I can speak to that is, if we put into the RFP that is going to be reviewed by civilian personnel or just keep it broad, we should be okay with that. Again, if our intent is to make sure that we have a non-sworn personnel or handling that, I think that'd be the best way to do it, or at least leave it open so we have the option to utilize either one. But again, our preference is going to be non-sworn.
There he is.
Just a quick guest appearance, Madam Chair, Councilor Faulkner. Yes, that is correct. Our Deputy Chief Grunler, who had been tasked with doing some of the research on this a couple of years ago, said that, his opinion, it's best for the language, the ordinance to be reflected in the RFP. So ideally, the language would be changed first so the RFP could mirror the preferred language from the ordinance.
Okay, so I spoke to staff about this today, and I think they're going to be reaching out to you to make sure that we get it exactly how we need it, so this goes smoothly moving through the process. And then there's an additional piece of legislation at the state level that is putting caps of some kind on speed cameras. I looked it up this morning. I'm not quite familiar enough with it yet, but we may want to track that because it's, I think in the legislation that we're working on the city level, we want to put some hefty fines on some of these things to curb the behavior. And I'm almost certain there is a piece of legislation running through the roundhouse right now that puts a cap on how much you can fine someone, and then it also prohibits certain kinds of penalties and fees. I'll look into it more tomorrow, but I just put it on your radar, Chief.
Thank you, ma'am. And again, we're tracking a lot of those bills, and we've been in communication with our colleagues throughout other jurisdictions that do have these systems in place and programs. And we're getting updates, and depending on how it all comes out at the end of the session, we'll have to see if we need to adjust or come with an update saying that it's going to be too tall of a task for us.
Do you feel like we should hold off on our legislation around speed cameras until all the legislation is done at the state level?
I defer to, again, you as the counselors to kind of make that call. I hate for you to put a lot of time into it and then you have to adjust again, but I think it'd be your best judgment call to see what would be in the best interest.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Counselor Castro, then Counselor Garcia.
Sure, thank you so much. I will also try to be brief. Interestingly enough, I'm in favor of this legislation, in particular because I feel that one of the things I'd like to see is it be all around the city. I would like to see our communities policed in an equitable way. And I think that it's really important that we are able to put our officers' time in places that are really important. And I would love to work with you on a code enforcement office. I do have a piece of legislation in because it seems like we might need some civil folks to review that. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Garcia.
Previously, the proposal that was brought for us a couple of years ago was for stationary cameras. The city used to utilize mobile cameras in the past. And so I would recommend, as we're moving forward with an RFP, we have a hybrid option because I think both options will work very well, especially in our corridors that, you know, I'd hate for us to put mobile cameras in Rios Road, for example, when we know there's a constant issue of speeding on that corridor. That would be a good option for permanent, whereas, as you mentioned, school zones, neighborhoods, et cetera, can utilize mobile. So if we can incorporate that into the RFP, that would be fantastic. And then you had mentioned, you know, the hopes would be to put this type of technology out of business. I have a different opinion. This begins for us to implement a service such as the service you and your officers provide to the community. It's just another mechanism for us to ensure that residents are safe. So whether it's paying for itself or not, that's besides the point. The question is it keeping our community safe? That's the ultimate test. If it's keeping our community safe, then it's an investment the city should be making, whether or not these tickets are paying for the program. So good luck. I think Councilor Faulkner and I will be in contact with you as we're trying to get all of this implemented. That way, everything comes out in an expedited manner. As I'm sure you all have heard, folks are eager for this type of technology, and we want to ensure it's implemented as quick as possible because it does ultimately lead to safer communities and a higher quality of life for residents. So thank you for bringing this forward.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Sorry, and I'll pull this at finance for this conversation. I'm curious if we are putting the cart before the horse and allocating dollars right now. Sounds like we have legislation at the state level we have to watch, legislation at the city level that we need to change. I know that we have to put out an RFP, and part of the conversation is working within the realm of our budget. However, it's very possible that the things we're going to be requiring might actually increase beyond our budget. We are coming up on a new fiscal year, new budgeting process, kind of soonish. So I'm happy to go ahead and move this forward now. I do think that this is something the community has really been asking for. And I think getting it up and running as soon as possible is important. And so again, this is a question for finance, a question for budget around utilizing dollars right now that potentially could be used for something else. Is this our only, kind of option for funding this program? I'm not sure that you guys that have these answers on you. Again, this is a question for finance. But that is a current concern that I have. Just in terms of how we are the most strategic with our money at any given time. We've had this conversation with our capital requests at the legislature, like let's request things that we're actually ready to do. So I have that is I think right now my biggest concern is this the best use of these funds at this precise moment in time? And if we don't have other funding sources later, that's okay, then we make that decision. But again, I'll be talking to finance and probably want to have that conversation at finance as it is more appropriate then. But something to think about over the next, 5-6 days before then.
Chair, if I may.
Councilor Faulkner.
Sense is that at the Roundhouse, none of the legislation that being run would be prohibitive for us to continue on this course. I think the piece of legislation that was putting caps and doing some things, I don't sense that it's going to pass. And then the other piece of legislation would only enhance what we're trying to.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Councilor. I
That's just
appreciate
my
that.
2 cents.
I appreciate your insight.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
One thing as well is if we wait to implement this later, that's going to put us down the road 6 more months. If it's in the next budget, if we get it there, or if it's not, this is a good opportunity for us to start getting the ball rolling, to get things going. And we may need to come back after we get everything going and say, hey, look, we need additional funding for this or for that. But this at least allows us to start the planning process, the RFP process. And our hopes would be that we can get the RFP process done before the next fiscal year so we can know what we're looking at.
Okay.
And we can start carving out, hey, here's what we're going to need to keep this going. Or here's where we can adjust to make sure that we're successful.
Okay. I appreciate that insight into the timeline. It just sounded like there was a lot of different moving pieces that needed to be clicking into place and not sure when those, but I guess if those pieces are not clicking in time and we have money later that we could get to this, we can always borrow it out somewhere else. So with that, is there a motion to approve? Motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Counselor Castro,
Yes.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner,
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
motion passes.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much for being here. Really, really appreciate it. Okay, rolling right along to item P. This is request for approval of a budget amendment resolution bar to allocate $100,000 from the general fund balances to fund contracts for experts to evaluate options for the Soldiers Monument. We have our new city manager, Mark Scott, here to present. This was pulled by myself, Councilor Faulkner, and Councilor Garcia. Councilor Faulkner, do you want to take it away for us?
I just want to kind of take the time to ensure the community that the feasibility study that's being done around the Soldiers Monument is not prescriptive in the sense that it is looking for one answer. We really want to see what our options are and what that would cost and what would be entailed in getting these things accomplished. Additionally, I think that it would be good for us to have a community meeting, and I know that Councilor Michael Garcia feels the same, from my perspective, I feel like a community meeting would best happen after we have the results back from the feasibility study. My fear is if you do not have answers for questions around community engagement, then that leaves it up to the community to try to figure out what's going on, basically. And so I think it's really important that we have a community meeting on this specifically and designated to this topic. But I also think it's critical that we do this in a way that we have information that we can give the community to ensure that there's transparency and that there's a clear understanding of our path forward, and that the community really gets its sound insight on what our options are. So that's all I had.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Garcia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Scott, I apologize that you're coming into this situation kind of not knowing a lot of the historical information. And so I'll kind of start at the high level and maybe dive down deeper. So as you may or may not be aware, there was a recent ruling by Judge Wilson in December that gave some prescriptive details in regards to how the city should be moving forward within a certain timeline. It's my understanding that we've met the first benchmark, which is taking the box off of the monument and all of the shrubbery, et cetera. Now, the next benchmark is to having some type of action within 180 days. There were a couple options within that time frame. So my question is, how does this interact with that timeline? Because I want to ensure we're adhering to Judge Wilson's order, but something like this can take time. It can take much longer than 180 days. And that's not what we've got. We got a lot less than 180 days. We've got 180 days minus what today's date is. So I think if you can answer that question for me, how are both of these actions blending? Because we've got the resolution that's guiding this study, but we've also got a judicial order that we need to comply with.
City Manager, is your mic on? Is your mic on? Oh. Sorry, City Manager, apparently your something's not working because you're not showing up there. So click it off, click it on again.
You know, it was green, but it wasn't lit.
But it wasn't bright green. Yeah, you really need that
You know,
lime
I'm
green
0 for 2 trying
in
to
your
work with
face.
my- Yeah, I'll be quick. Yeah, the question, it's a good question, obviously. My understanding is that the staff has been working with a company that they've identified, at least one company that they've identified that feels they have the capacity to do this kind of analysis to determine whether and how to restore the monument. And there was a secondary question, I believe, as to whether there was an option that would or would not be feasible to move the monument. And both of those were questions that the staff had addressed to the consulting company. And it was stressed that there's a timeline on this, and that we would need to have a turnaround on that in short order, 60 to 90 day kind of turnaround on the analysis. As you say, you never know until you get into these analyses exactly where it'll go, whether or not there will end up being follow-up issues that have to be addressed. But that's the assumption going into this, that we can get a firm to come in and do that kind of analysis on that timeline and provide the city councilors with an option the options that you have, not just one, but the various options that you have to make the decision. So I think there is an understanding that timing is very critical.
Okay, thank you, City Manager Scott. And just so the public is aware, there was an RFP issued to conduct this work. So we're not waiting on an RFP to be put out. Can you help the public understand where we are in regards to that part of the timeline, how this money is going to go towards that? And because it is all blending together, right?
Right. Yeah, the contract hasn't been fully negotiated, but it's at a point where it won't take long to work that out and then bring that forward for approval. And obviously this funding is part and parcel to that.
Okay, thank you so much. And as Councillor Faulkner mentioned, I 100% agree that once this study is done, that we have some type of public meeting
Right.
that allows for residents to participate and give their input and opinion.
And I would note that part of the negotiation with the firm is the understanding that there would be some public participation process that they would be involved. So that is assumed as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, to dive a little deeper, just because this is all blending into the resolution that guided this allocation request, which is consulting the SHPO.
Right.
It's my understanding that folks have been in contact with them already. Even some counselors have been, which I've not been given a single ounce of information on, which I find it very unfortunate. So this gets back to a point I've been trying to raise since Judge Wilson's hearing or his decision back in December, is that the council needs to be on the same page, and to have a counselor or two meeting with this SHPO on their own and not including the rest of the governing body is a disservice to all of us. And it's also a disservice to the public, because then the public is going to think that there are ulterior motives, which I cannot say, or because I've not been involved in this process. And I think with the project that has been so controversial, that we lost trust with the public on this topic. You know, it's been this August, it'll be 5 years that we haven't done anything. And, you know, I look back to 2021 when we started the chart process, and Mr. Scott, you weren't here with us then, but that was something that was supposed to help guide us through this challenging period and lead us to a decision. And it didn't. I said it then, and I'll continue to say it now, it was a failure. When the facilitators of that project in the first quarterly report ignored my concerns around them not making it a priority, that was the red herring for me. And here we are, 3 years later after that report was issued. We've got one less box on the monument, which I'm thankful for, but we don't have a decision. And so my concern is that we're going to get a report and then we continue to be indecisive. And so I think it's critical that the governing body gets on the same page in regards to how we begin to move forward with the decision-making process, and have it be an inclusive process, not only with the governing body, but with the public. And that's why I've asked for a special governing body meeting be held specifically on this topic solely, so that the governing body can really understand what the options are ahead of us. But even more importantly, allow for the public to come and have this discussion with us. Because when we have these special meetings or study sessions that they've been called in the past, it's a quick 2-hour meeting, and each of us gets 10 minutes and it's done, and we shake our hands and we say, oh, we did it. No, something like this, it can be a 7-hour meeting. It's heavy work. We have a lot of work ahead of us. And I think it's incumbent of us to ensure that not only that we as a governing body have sufficient time, but the public has sufficient time to engage with us. Because I'm already hearing a lot of misinformation. We saw it in the paper that, the judge's ruling said that the monument is going to be rebuilt, and that's not what the judge's order said. And we owe it to the public to fully explain what the options are, what they're not, more importantly, and how do we then begin to move towards decision? And more importantly, how do we begin to heal from that situation and move towards a united future? So, Mr. Scott, this is a very important contract, and that's why I'm kind of giving you a little history of where we've been, where we hope to go, at least from my perspective, because it's not going to end with this appropriation for the feasibility study. That's just scratching the surface and at least telling us what we could do and could not do. But there are also other parts of the conversation that need to be had, which is, allowing for the governing body to, as a whole, participate in the process. And that's why I'm bringing it to your attention as the city manager, because it's a disservice to the entire governing body when staff or counselors are meeting with SHPO and we're not getting updates on the information or the conversation that's taking place. So.
Appreciate it, Madam Chair. I have pledged you in the past that I'm going to do my best to provide equal and equitable information to the whole city council and to the public. And so I know my challenge moving forward as leader of the staff effort to bring forward options and alternatives is to provide that information as fairly and as openly as we possibly can. You all have to make a tough decision at the end, and it's up to us to make sure we provide you the information that allows you to do that in a credible manner. And that's my charge.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Scott. And with that, I'll put forward the request again to you. I mean, we do need to have a public hearing once that study is done, but I think there needs to be a pre-meeting with the governing body, with the public to say, look, this is where we're at. There's going to be an even more important meeting in the future once we get the results of this study, but that way we can all begin to get on the same page, because I don't think we're there yet. And I think a special governing body will allow for us to take that step. So thank you, Mr. Scott. No other questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. I do want to just clarify a few things. I do have the ruling from Judge Wilson up right now, so I want to clarify the time frame. This would be, if anybody has it, and it is a public document, on page 22, item 67. Further, the court enters the following injunctive relief to effectuate the court's judgment. The city of Santa Fe shall, within 30 days from entry of this order, A, deconstruct and remove the box and every element thereof that currently covers and obscures nearly every component of the Soldiers Monument. B, remove the sign in front of the Soldiers Monument. And C, remove any shrub, tree, pot, bag, or any other purposefully obscuring item or feature from or near the base of the Soldiers Monument. That has been taken care of. 68. Thereafter, the city shall either A, within 180 days from entry of this order, restore the Soldiers Monument to a like or similar condition to that depicted in the pre-2020 conditions, photographs set forth in Plaintiff's Exhibit 10, thereby constituting permissible maintenance, repair, or stabilization pursuant to 4.10.12.7 NMAC 1108. Or B, is take no further action with respect to the Soldiers Monument unless A, such action does not constitute a use within the scope of 4.10.12.7, blah, 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 blah. Or B, the city of Santa Fe is acting in accordance with the Prehistoric and Historic Sites Preservation Act and its related regulations 4.10.12, NMAC 91589 as amended through 1108. So I do think that this does pose an interesting question because if we are not restoring it to its pre-2020 conditions within 180 days, but we determined to restore it to its pre-2020 conditions within not 180 days, I am curious if that then puts us out of compliance. I would imagine that it does not, that we would not lose the choice if we go past 180 days, but 180 days, that was the timeline that only applied to restoring it to the pre-2020 condition. So I think that that is and potentially, I mean, that's a question for the legal team. But does, kind of beg the question of where we do think this timeline exists. I would, again, I highly doubt that we would lose the option to restore if that was what we chose to do. But I did just want to, again, there's, as Councilor Garcia mentioned, there's a lot of misunderstanding. People thought, we had to rebuild it. So I want to make sure that we are clear on that ruling because there's a lot of information there, and of course a lot of room for interpretation. So I think that that's important for us as we continue to move forward because there is conversation about moving it, which would then put it into item B or option B. Which would have us go through SHPO. So I did just want to clarify that piece that there's a couple different, a few different components, one that we have already met. I do have some other questions. I will go ahead and defer to the rest of the committee at this time. Councilor Chavez.
Thank you. And I don't know if it's just a discussion. So I have some questions or some comments or thoughts for my counselors up here. I do think that with this process, I agree that the community has to be involved. I agree that we all have to receive the information at the same time. Any lack of transparency or inequity just amongst how we receive information is going to cause a huge issue. It's going to completely derail this process. So I actually wanted to talk to Councilor Garcia or get his opinion on, because of that, I almost feel like one meeting is more effective because I do think the community, when they know we have special meetings and they are not able to be involved, they almost feel like they're not receiving the information at the same time. So really just, reassuring the community that the process is counselors plus community members are receiving this report at the same time. Public can be involved in that comment. Our discussion is fresh and, in real time is actually more effective. But I just wanted to see your thoughts on that, Councilor Garcia, if you can see how that could be beneficial, perhaps.
I do. I mean, I'm always one for efficiency, but given we've got essentially two competing issues at hand, right? We've got this resolution that passed, which was ultimately intended to move the monument. And it was not until, amendments were made that looked at the option of restoring it and moving it. So I think that's where I see the benefit to just give the public an initial update, because if we have not done that, there's been newspaper articles, right? And still people are confused. Just a few weeks ago, I talked to somebody that said, when are you rebuilding it? You've gone to so many days. And it's like, that's not the option in front of us. And so I think my concern is that if we wait until a study is done, folks might have an idea, that there's a preconceived outcome, and that's just due to the loss of trust throughout this whole entire past couple of years. And that's where have a level setting meeting previously to the results coming out saying, these are the options. This is what's happened through the resolution. This is what's happened through the court case. This is where we're at. And wait for the big update, which is going to be the feasibility study. And that is when we'll really have the menu of options, right? And I think because we don't know what it says. I mean, we don't, the results might come back. You can't move it. Or the results might be come back, you can move it at a cost of $10 million, or you can rebuild it, but at the cost of $10 million. And I want the public to have a full understanding of what are the options. But before we even know that, people need to understand where we are at with the process. And we just haven't done that. We haven't had the conversation of what are our next steps, right? Because even it took counselors speaking out through the press to ultimately say we're not going to appeal the decision. And these are discussions that the public wants to know where we as governing body members stand. And if we just kind of wait to have a meeting later, there's a lot of information that I feel we can share with folks and begin to build back trust. Because it's not going to be one meeting, it's not going to be two meetings. It's going to be 10 years worth of meetings that are ultimately going to build back the trust that this government has lost because of what has transpired over the last couple of years. And I want the public to have full faith and confidence that as we are moving forward, we're sharing that information with them. And I can't even say that's taken place because, again, as I mentioned, as a governing body member, I was informed that governing body members are meeting with the SHPO's office, and I have no idea what's going on. And that's not fair to me. It's not fair to the public. And again, it just leads to that assumption that, well, it's a predetermined outcome. And why should we even show up in the first place? Because that's what happened with CHART. We had so many folks that had that ideology that I'm not going to participate. It's all set up to get somebody's outcome. Well, that wasn't beneficial to the process. And I want us to provide every opportunity for the public to feel that they're wanted, needed, and their voice has a value, and it's part of the whole entire process that we've got to go through. So hopefully that's helpful.
That does. So you're talking more of like a pre-feasibility presentation of some sort
Just
with discussion opportunities. And I think that would be great. I think that us knowing the process, I think that could be something that we add to an agenda, governing body agenda as a presentation to give us an opportunity to discuss. But I think, from the ruling to where we're at right now in regards to, jumping into the feasibility study, I think a timeline presentation would actually be beneficial. And, I think getting that on an agenda as soon as possible, a governing body agenda presentation that's very clear, very transparent where we're at. We're all receiving the same information. We're all sharing that same information with our community members. I think would be beneficial. I think that where the value is going to be what's going to be most valuable in this whole process is the involvement of the community. But I think them understanding the timeline so far is really important. So I actually see that being beneficial. I would second to request a presentation of some sort on a governing body agenda sooner than later, just giving all of us and the community an update as to where we're at, what we know so far, prior to us going into this next phase. Thank you.
Did you want to?
Chair,
Absolutely.
to the council. Yeah, I'm more than happy to put together a timeline and a status report. Can't do it yet. I don't know the answers to those questions yet, but I will be working on that urgently, and I'll be happy to put that report.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Counselor Castro.
Yes, thank you so much. City Manager, you're coming to a very exciting time at the city of Santa Fe. Just to sort of bring home some of this discussion, a lot of our conversation around this monument has to do with identity and the feeling of erasure. It's a lot larger than this monument. So to Councilor Garcia's point, this is an unending conversation that we're going to be dealing with for quite a while. So thank you so much for your patience and thank you for helping us work through this. And it seems like we're adding another $100,000 to this process, coming about $300,000 in. So it's a very expensive process that we're embarking on.
Thank you so much, Counselor. I do want to, I have a couple questions. I do want to state that there's nothing preventing any of us from reaching out to SHPO on our own. In fact, it's on my to-do list, and that is part of me wanting to understand this process. Now, back to the conversations around presentation, I agree that a presentation understanding, again, the ruling, there's a lot of legalese if you read this. And so there is a lot of confusion. So I think that it would be very beneficial for information about what that ruling was, as well as understanding SHPO, because I had a lot of misunderstandings about SHPO and still do, hence me wanting to go reach out to them. I think for us as a governing body that it is going to be very important that we lead with our language around building back trust. And that, you know, counselors looking for more information is not due to a ulterior motive. You know, again, reaching out to SHPO's on my to-do list myself, just to really gather more information. So I think that would be helpful in terms of everybody wanting to get the information. And I know that at this point, we don't have, from my understanding, that SHPO gets involved if we have a proposal for them that is other than rebuilding it as was. Now, I could be wrong. Again, this is a learning experience for me and some new information. So I do think bringing that information to the governing body and to the public is really important. In terms of community engagement, I actually think this is an area that we need to take a closer look, because I have not seen any of our public meetings where people get 2 minutes to come and speak to their opinion on the obelisk to be at all beneficial in us either bringing the community back together. Well, maybe not at all beneficial, but I don't think that is the process by which we are going to start. I don't think it's a very beneficial community engagement model, not just for this, but honestly for anything. It really, you know, we do the public comment now, you know, when Councilor Romero Worth and I changed the procedural rules for the governing body, we put public comment for ordinances prior to going through committee so we could at least get that feedback, but it doesn't allow for us to have a discussion with the public. It does not allow, and I think more importantly, for the discussion to have a conversation with each other. What I have seen with this issue is a lot of people talking at us and not talking to each other. When, as I have said, one of the benefits I've had of being able to sit in this seat is I get to talk to a lot of people, and so understanding the different perspectives on this. So I agree that community engagement does need to happen with this. I think that we all need to think we need to be looking at different models. Councilor Faulkner and I, and along with Councilor Lee Garcia, we are currently working on a resolution that would bring, thank you, Councilor Castro, that would ask for a civic assembly on this. So in order to better facilitate and focus on solution building coming from the community. If anybody's curious what a civic assembly is, we had a presentation on that at one of our earlier quality of life committee meetings. So that is there for the public to take a look. But essentially it is a group that comes together. They're lotteried in. So it is a random sampling that is meant to be representative of the community to be having this discussion. There's a lot of education that comes in. It is facilitated by a professional so that there is deliberation that occurs as opposed to debate. So Councilor Faulkner and Councilor Garcia and I will be bringing that forward. So we'll be able to have a robust conversation about that then, but I just wanted to let everybody know about that so that you all are aware that is something that we are working on. But I think that this is, I think this is a broader conversation. I think this issue, because it is so, it brings about, it's hard, but it brings up so many emotions. It's very, I don't even want to use the word inflammatory. It's very, pardon?
It's value-based on both sides.
Exactly.
All sides, and those are very difficult discussions to facilitate.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate, yeah, exactly. That it's such a, to your point, value-based, and there's a lot going on. But I think it has really brought to the surface the fact that we don't always do community engagement as well as we should. And I have said about CHAR, I agree with Councilor Garcia, it did not achieve what we wanted it to. I'm not sure I'd call it, it did not achieve what we wanted it to in this regard. And I have said one thing that we didn't have was the benefit of seeing how well the Midtown Engagement Partner Model worked, which we are, again, going to be utilizing for the general plan update. We've learned a lot of really good lessons. So I do think we need to think very hard about both how we give information to the public, and I agree, you know, how we bring that information forward for both the governing body and the public. You know, as counselors, we of course are free to do whatever research and information we want. And then that is often helpful for me to bring to the city manager's office to say, I learned this thing, everybody else should know about it, or I bring it here if I can't get it onto the governing body list. But I also just will challenge us to have that conversation. That said, I'm going to focus us back on this approval. I just want us to be extremely clear. This feasibility study will be looking at the possibility of what, or essentially what it would cost, what is structurally possible to rebuild the monument without the fourth plaque, either where it is now or to move it and rebuild it somewhere else. So we will get information for both of those options from this. Is that correct? I don't think your mic's on again. Oh, wait,
Lit.
there we go. There it is. Okay, just gotta eat it, you know?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. And just so again, I'm making sure that we all understand, this feasibility study does not engage SHPO at this point in time. Am I correct there?
The study does not know.
Okay.
That doesn't keep us from reaching out on follow-up research that the study may suggest would be appropriate. But it's not a SHPO study, it's an analysis of the option of being able to either restore or move.
Wonderful. Thank you. So we should not expect a report from SHPO when we get the results of the feasibility study.
I will look into where we are with the analysis on SHPO, and I'll make that part of the status report.
Wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate that because
Sure.
again, I'm from my, and I still am learning a lot from my understanding. The conversations with SHPO are not quite like official. It's opinions, and it takes a proposal for us to come forward for them to actually start the process. And then that process is different than what I thought it was going to be anyhow. So I do think all of us understanding what that actually means is going to be extremely important. But I wanted to make sure that we knew what could come in a presentation from you and what we should be expecting in this feasibility study. So thank you for clarifying all of that for me. We are moving along unless anybody else has anything really burning to say that we are going to, you know, we're going to be having a lot more conversations specifically about this bar. I would like to get a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second. Any other, Councilor Garcia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In regards to engaging the public, there's nothing that prevents us from suspending our rules. And we can have that dialogue with the public. We don't have to adhere to the rules to where it's 2 minutes per person. We can say we're going to suspend our rules during public comment. Somebody comes up, we can have a back and forth dialogue with them should the entire governing body approve to suspend the rules. So that's a mechanism that we can implement immediately. Just because there's discussion around a civic assembly, there are concerns from community members that initiating a civic assembly so soon after the failure of CHART could set up mistrust for future civic assemblies. The hope is that the civic assembly process is something that residents fully believe in, and using it as a pilot for such a controversial project could ultimately taint the civic assembly process without it even beginning.
Councilor Garcia, I'm sorry. We are going to really have a chance to have a very robust conversation on all of this. Specifically regarding the bar, we do still have some more items to go. And I think that we should have a robust conversation about community engagement. I'm not, if you could just wrap up a little bit, because again, I do think this is an important conversation and not something we're going to solve here. And part of the reason I wanted to bring up the civic engagement was to let everybody know that we are going to be providing an opportunity to really have that. And I want to have that conversation. But just, but please finish up. But I think that, we've all had an opportunity to speak on that, and now we can, really vote on the dollars and cents at hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I believe my comments are completely relevant, yes, given that they were made. And I'd like to just give my colleagues a heads up in regards to some of the information that they might not be aware of. So I feel it's relevant. And so to interrupt and try to cut me off, I just find it very disappointing. So
Again, okay, I'd like to call for the vote. Roll call, please.
Counselor Castro,
Yes.
Counselor Chavez, Counselor Garcia,
yes.
Counselor Faulkner,
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, City Attorney. I'm sorry. I apologize. Moving on. We are moving on to item Q. This is request for approval of a budget amendment resolution to allocate $1,078,000 from general fund balances and $174,850 from lodgers tax fund for a total amount of $1,252,850 to fund various equipment, software, general plan code update, and development projects within Planning and Land Use Department. We have Director Lamboy from Planning and Land Use here to present. I have pulled this item because I really just wanted to highlight some of the items that are coming forward that are relevant to a lot of conversations we've had both within committees and with the community. Specifically, the Land Use Working Group has reached out to us on a number of things. And I know many of us have met with them. So I think getting some information on those would be relevant. First and foremost, we do have $27,000 for computer upgrades for building permit division to prepare for the electronic review improvements, as well as $80,000 for an e-review consultant. It's Park Consulting. $120,000 was already appropriated in 2024. And so this will include both building and planning modules. Can you provide us some more information on where we are with this? Where are we with the rollout, and what are the benefits that we're hoping to see for the community, and what problems and issues that the community has brought up that we're hoping to solve with these?
Thank you, Chair Cassett and members of the council. It's nice to be here tonight. Just one quick aside, if I may. Our historic preservation consultant can give you, she used to work at SHPO, and she possibly can give this body an educational session on SHPO processes if you wish, so that everybody can hear it at the same time. So it's just an offer. So with reference to the e-review process, I have been working with the Land Use Working Group of the Builders Division as well, the Builders Group, as well as the AIA, to help us pave the way forward for e-review. It's long overdue. And so Tom Graham and I have interviewed a variety of consultants, and we've landed on Park Consulting. They have had lots of experience working with the InterGov platform in other cities. And we will utilize this resource to help us operate better. So the first steps will include sort of improving the back office functions of InterGov, and then we'll roll those out and do beta testing with actually the Land Use Working Group as we go forward on those front-facing items. This is also going to help us not be in a linear process, which drives me crazy. right now, one plant that goes to another station, and it's very linear. And this will enable us to actually have lots of reviewers reviewing the projects at the same time. So looking forward to that.
Wonderful. Thank you. And very glad to hear that the land use working group is going to be involved and that we're able to speed some of these processes up. The other area that I'm really excited about that again has been a real topic of conversation is the dollars for the short-term rental software to assist with tracking and enforcement. We know that this has been a really big challenge. So can you tell us a little bit more about what this software is going to allow us to do that we cannot currently do with our current systems that we're using?
Thank you, Chair Cassett. With reference to Avenue software, this all started when we were meeting with the county assessor's office. We have a quarterly meeting to coordinate our efforts in using technology platforms and the like. And so the conversation of short-term rentals came up. And they use the Granicus platform. And we'd had lots of problems with Granicus. And we were talking about data sharing across the platforms in order to help each other out when it comes to enforcement relative to short-term rentals. And so that started an investigation process really being led by Tom Graham to determine what kind of tools do we have out there that are available to us that are more effective. And the nice sort of happy accident that has happened is that our finance department has become involved because of the cashiering and those functions, tax collection can all be managed through the Avenue software, which was not available under Granicus. So that will also help finance with the management of leases for all buildings and properties, city properties throughout the city. So it is really a collaborative effort with both finance, three groups, finance as well as planning and land use, and then lodgers funding. We've been working with Randy Randall as well. So that's why you see a cobbling together of funds. But the intent is to help several different aspects of city business and also help us with enforcement. Granicus didn't perform like it should have, and we're very pleased with the initial reports we've received regarding Avenue. We've called other clients and gotten their feedback too, and it's all good feedback.
Wonderful. Thank you. Because, one of the big issues we frequently hear about is, are we actually allowing the number of short-term rentals that our ordinance allows, our current ordinance allows, and not really being able to get very good data so that we can understand how our short-term rental ordinance is working, what updates. I think most of us are looking at the fact that we need some updates there. But from my conversations with you and the land use team, my understanding is this is really going to allow us to hone in our data quite a bit more, really understand what the landscape is looking like when it comes to short-term rentals and within the city, right? Not just within the county, because I know that we have that like air DNA or something along those lines where we can kind of get a better picture, but we can't drill down just into the city. But this will allow us to really understand what's happening in that regard at the city level, correct?
Yes, that's correct, Chair Cassett. We also have received some initial data as part of their proposal, and it's pretty shocking what's out there in terms of not being registered with the city. And also, we really need to be able to use that data to help us formulate a strategy going forward on how we want to approach short-term rentals and ensure that it benefits the community at large.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you so much. I think that was all the questions I had. Oh, wait, no, the other one I'm just excited about is to create a development review handbook that's going to look at processes and submittal requirements for development to review building permitting and inspections. I know that that is something that has, that we've heard a lot of people talk about challenges for really wanting to understand the steps, making sure that they're, painted out very clearly so that everyone knows we're on the same page. I know that I've heard people say that they, talk to one staff member and they hear something else and then they get different news here and different news here. So really being able to consolidate that. I know I've spoken with AD Moore right now, right? She's Assistant Director Moore. Is that true? Maggie?
Maggie Ball?
Yeah, is that am I in the correct title? About, how do we really start to build off of these within the code update, looking at, business licensing, looking at all of these different handbooks and checklists. So I'm really excited to see this get started. And, I'm hoping that this is going to really assist with the community understanding, and not just our, developers or the individuals that are doing the land use consulting, but our everyday residents. So one request I would have is making sure that these are not written in land use language. I don't know what the land use is, not whatever the legalese version of land use is, or the land use version of legalese is, but that it is really written for just the general public to understand, how do we do this? So thank you. That is all the questions and comments I have. Any questions, comments from members of the committee? Counselor Castro.
Just very quickly, I would love to follow up with you, Director, in terms of that code enforcement office. I think that might be really relevant in terms of short-term rentals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. May I please have a roll call?
Counselor Castro?
Yes.
Counselor Chavez?
Yes.
Counselor Garcia?
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner?
Yes.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Chair
Wonderful.
Cassidy,
Pardon?
Just
Yes.
another point I would like to make with the
Absolutely.
development route.
I apologize. Yes, Director Lamboy.
It's not only an opportunity to make things in plain language, and of course, we'll have the planning commission take a look at this and make sure it's understandable to the layperson, but it's also an opportunity for us to use a Lean Six Sigma-like process to really examine our processes and see if there's redundancy, see how we can do it better, using Intergov, but also our processes can we improve? So that also is just a component of that, which I think is important that we do.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to it. Okay, last item for the night. Item R. This is request for approval of a budget amendment resolution bar to allocate $3,088,000 from general fund balances, $350,000 from the 0.5% capital GRT fund for a total amount of $3,438,000 to support and expand existing human services under Connect, Homeless Solutions, Guaranteed Income and Immigration Support. We have Julie Sanchez and Henry Hammond Paul. Julie Sanchez is our Youth and Family Services Director, and Director Hammond Paul is our Director of Community Health and Safety to present. I pulled this as well. The real reason I wanted to pull this one has to do with the Cerrillos Road security. When we had the conversation around the security contract that is now covering downtown, I had really advocated for it to go on Cerrillos Road instead. And so I'm very excited to see this coming forward. And I would like to hear a little bit more about it because I'm not sure it's the same model. So I want to hear a little bit more about what this is going to look like and getting this started.
Madam Chair, councilors, thanks very much. Marcella, I think we're going to have to talk about putting this item last on the agenda at some point. So thank you for the question. And to be clear, I think the first point of this work is to acknowledge the challenges that are being experienced up and down the Cerrillos corridor. That is from every metric that we have in our department as well as other departments, a priority area. We see many residents, businesses, and individuals expressing concern over this. So as a response to that, the first thing is to acknowledge that. The second is to do something about it. And we are working to seek services that are kind of two interesting parts. One is community-based public safety. The second piece is community outreach. So one side of this type of service that we're looking to bring to that area with speed is to actually respond to the interest of businesses and community members to do direct engagement when something is happening. This is a different function than law enforcement, but it is a complementary type of service. whether there is kind of precursors to aggressive behavior, doing proactive engagement on those fronts. So having trained teams in conflict resolution and that type of engagement, going out proactively engaging. So that's the public safety piece. The second side of that is actually outreach. So where you're not actively de-escalating a situation that law enforcement can't or that is kind of beneath the scope of law enforcement, perhaps. When you're not de-escalating, you're actually going out and finding folks, meeting them where they're at, and trying to engage them in a set of services. There are a bunch of models and organizations that we're eager to have apply to an RFP. The other piece of this, in addition, there's two other pieces that I think are really important to this. So public safety. The second piece is, where do people go during the day? That's a big challenge, right? A lot of the things that community members are frustrated with are behaviors associated with loitering, being in a space, and without getting too deep into the weeds of why that is occurring, people just don't have a place to be. So part of the model that we are hoping to, or part of the services that we're writing into the RFP is developing spaces in the city. Two spaces, one specific to the Cerrillos Corridor area and one specific to De Vargas Park area. So covering kind of two hotspot areas in the city, giving folks a secure, 20 monitored place where they can be during the day that's not disruptive to other people in the area, where they can begin to get services. Behaviors are overseen, and maybe Director Sanchez has a better word, but there's constant presence where folks are being engaged and working towards not being disruptive. And then the third piece is actually, again, responding to a concern, and a very visible concern, is providing storage for individuals with belongings that they have and don't have a place to store. So part of these facilities, so we have outreach, bringing folks to places where they can get services, de-escalating situations, providing a public safety function, and then bringing folks to a place where they can be, as well as store their belongings so they're not having to move them around with them.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's I really appreciate appreciate all that detail and information. Can you guys tell me a little bit more about, so I know we often have a lot of conversations about locations where things are happening, and how we work with the community in those areas. Can you please give me more information about what that plan is going to look like?
So Madam Chair, that's a wonderful question. So with this particular project, we're really using a data-driven approach. So right now we're looking at what hotspots exist in our city, where folks are hanging out, where are we looking at involvement where, police or security are really needed. And so those are the areas that we're going to concentrate these efforts in. And a majority of that is going to be along the Cerrillos Road corridor.
Wonderful, thank you. And I do know that this kind of Security Plus model almost has been utilized in other cities and other areas. Do you have any information at this time about the success, about what we've seen, what we've learned that we want to do different here?
So Madam Chair, counselors, there's quite a few models that have been implemented. I mean, everywhere from big cities like LA to Baltimore to smaller, I say smaller cities like Austin, smaller, but smaller-ish cities like Austin have implemented these pilot programs, and they have been incredibly successful. And really what it's about is connecting with individuals who are unsheltered and getting them into services, treating folks humanely, as well as providing a public safety service to the surrounding community and businesses.
Dr. Hempel?
If I may, Madam Chair, Councilors, another aspect that we are eager to articulate in this work is that the individuals who will be doing this work are people who will be recruited from the local workforce. So this is in some effects going back into the community in terms of who will be receiving employment through this program.
Wonderful. Thank you for that point. I really appreciate you highlighting that. I have no further questions. I really am looking forward to seeing how this program goes. I am going to want to bring updates to quality of life fairly regularly as we have things to report on them. So, thank you for taking this initiative. I know that this is, again, as we have discussed before, one piece of this really, really broad strategy to address this milieu of issues that we're experiencing along Cerrillos Road in particular, but also throughout the city. So, Director Hammond Paul, I know that you and I have discussed how we continue to bring that information to quality of life. So just so all of you know, there will be a presentation in the coming future that's going to really look at this strategy on a broader level. So that's all the questions and comments I have for now. Anything else from the committee? Councilor Castro.
Very quickly, thank you so much, both of you. I know I take up way too much of your time, so I will try to be brief. I do just want to flag safe parking spaces. I know that that's a conversation that we've had, and we do have about 50 families that are living in their cars in Santa Fe. And also, I'd like to know a little bit about your collaboration with park rangers and ARU.
So Madam Chair, Councilor Castro, so yes, we are taking into account safe parking. That's something that's on the top of our agenda that we continue to discuss internally, and we'll hopefully bring updates to this committee at some point in the near future. In terms of the park rangers and ARU, so park rangers would work in coordination with this group. Our hope is that, again, when park rangers find folks in encampment, that this could be a resource that they could refer folks to, as well as folks who are working with this group can be referred to ARU services. So there is going to be a linkage between our internal city outreach service, what we would call outreach services, into this group's program.
If I may, Counselor, one other piece there. So as Director Sanchez said, the idea here is to have this as a kind of auxiliary service that complements existing services in the city. So we don't want these kind of community-based public safety teams and community outreach services overlapping with or interfering with the jobs of our rangers or the ARU or police department for that matter, but rather to fill a gap that we see of, there are things that don't meet the threshold for police law enforcement engagement. There are things that don't jurisdictionally fall under the park rangers. There are things that don't fall under where the ARU engages, and this is kind of filling that void in some regards, which I think is deeply needed in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions. I'm sure I will talk to both of you about this in the future. And I do want to just mention that the current security at Pete's Place Interfaith Shelter has been really helpful. So thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Councilor Castro. And I will state that you tend to be actually the shortest winded of pretty much all of us. So you do not take up too much of people's time. Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question of clarification. The allocation for the Cerrillos Road security is just the allocation. There will be a contract coming forth. Am I understanding correct? Okay. All right.
A verbal for the record. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
No other questions.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. May I please get a roll call?
Counselor Castro.
Yes.
Counselor Chavez. Counselor Garcia.
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner.
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Wonderful. Thank you. That concludes all of our official business for the day. Moving on to matters from staff. Director Nelson, to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilors, I have a few items to mention to make sure they're on your radar. Next Friday, not this one, next Friday, I hope you're aware that the city's arts and culture department is hosting their UNESCO celebration. Just a reminder, 4 to 8 at the Convention Center. Really exciting to see that taking place. In the Office of Affordable Housing, I want to remind everybody that those RFPs for CDBG, my acronyms are going to start flowing, but the CDBG and the Affordable Housing Trust Fund closed last Friday. And I want to acknowledge that our finance team and our Office of Affordable Housing team were really great in kind of taking the reins in this interim transition period. We did close, and now we are working with the procurement team to do those evaluations with our CDC, and that is moving forward. There were concerns from the community because the process switched to an RFP from a request for applications. And so we're pretty attentive in responding to some of those concerns. And again, that was following procurement law. So I feel like it was in the city's best interest to follow the advice from the procurement team, but happy to take any questions or concerns offline. We are also considering doing a survey after this process to solicit feedback from community members and organizations to see what we can do to change and be more supportive next time. And then I also want to throw out there that in March, blanking on the exact date, but we are hosting our next Small Business Finance Fair. This will actually be at the Santa Fe Airport. And we are focusing this round on equity investment. So if you know businesses in your areas that are interested in exploring what is equity investment, we'll have a lot of VC and equity and angel firms there to talk to businesses. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Director Hammond Paul.
Madam Chair, councilors, thank you very much. 3 quick updates. One, I want to, some of you may know or may not, but the city of Las Vegas is experiencing a water shortage, and the Office of Emergency Management, as well as the Water Division, have stepped up and are through a intrastate mutual aid system agreement, delivering about 400,000 gallons of water a day until the city of Las Vegas is able to get their capabilities back up and running. So it was a great collaborative effort from all the divisions, including City Attorney's Office, Fire Department was engaged, Office of Emergency Management, obviously. And so wanted to make folks aware that, and this is coming at zero disruption to the city's resources. So that 50%, I believe, of folks in Las Vegas were without potable water. So this is a critical work that's happening. Second, I wanted to refresh folks that on the 5th, I believe, of the next governing quality of life meeting, Director Sanchez and myself will be giving an update on the homelessness action plan. And then on the 12th, we'll be giving an update to the governing body following the discussion about pallet communities. So providing an update on our community engagement strategy. And then the last piece is that we are nearing completion of renovations at the MEG, the senior center. And someone once said to me, when you see construction, that's a good thing because that means people are investing in their communities. So as soon as we complete that round of renovations, we'll be actually looking to do further improvements. So those are the 3 items I wanted to make you all aware of.
Thank you so much. Marcella, anything from you today? Matters from the committee? Any matters from the committee? Councilor Castro?
So Saturday, Museo Cultural Black History Month celebration starting at 4 p.m.
Is this on the plaza?
Museo Cultural in the rail yard.
Thank you. Thank you so
4
much.
p.m. on Saturday.
Matters from the chair. I want to take a moment to apologize for losing my patience earlier. While I did not feel that my ability as chair to direct the meeting was being respected in a way that I appreciate, that still does not excuse my behavior. So I do want to apologize to Councilor Garcia and to the committee and to the staff. I will try to do better in the future, even when I am in disagreement with my colleagues, of conducting myself in a way that I feel is more appropriate for my position, both on this governing body as well as the leader of the committee. So I did want to apologize to everybody. Our next meeting is going to be on March 5th. And with that, we are adjourned at 7:21 p.m. Thank you.